So there are a lot of agents to play on Valorant, but if you want to reach the higher echelon of players, you're going to have to learn a small pool of agents. And of course, every agent has their ins and outs and mechanics that you have to master. So I'm going to be giving you the hardest things you have to learn for every single character. So without further ado, we're going to be starting off with Jett. Jett is probably the most used duelist in Valorant, but there's a lot you have to learn if you want to be a really good Jett. The main learning points for this character is learning how to use your movement and being aware of the options you have when it comes to movement. So first of all, when I mean learning her movement, that means that you have to learn how to use her abilities and what you can get away with. Not only that, but you have to be very creative with the way you use her. If you see a lot of the top level Jetts, they are very creative with their movement, and if you play Jett in a very predictable way, it's going to be very easy for you to die. And what I mean by being aware of your abilities is that you have to know what you have available to you whenever it becomes available. Like for example, whenever I was learning Jett in the beta, I would dash into sight, kill 2 people, and not realize that I had my dash open again. Now me getting that dash again would have been able to get me out of that sticky situation, and me not realizing that I have it caused me to die. So you always have to be aware of what movement options you have. So now we're going to be moving on to KO, and KO is the newest addition to the roster, but there is a lot to learn about him. Now the main things you have to learn with KO are his flashes. Now a good KO flash is impossible to react to, but a bad KO flash is probably the easiest flash in the game to react to. And I know these flashes may seem simple in nature and the way they work, but there is actually a very high skill ceiling when it comes to using them. Now there are several tricks to trying to make these flashes more effective, and one of them is throwing the flash on the ground whenever you're trying to peek somebody. Now speaking from experience, I can tell you firsthand that whenever a KO throws his flash on the ground, they are pretty hard to react to. And not because you don't have the reaction time to do it, but it's because sometimes you don't know that you're looking at a flash until it pops. So for example, like a Phoenix flash, you kind of see it coming your way. A Reyna flash, you can see it in the air. And normally whenever a KO flashes, he'll throw it up in the air, and your mind kind of learns to register whenever there's things flying at you. But whenever you see something bouncing on the ground like that, you kind of don't process it in time sometimes, like if you're not used to it, that is. So if you do want to get better at KO, I suggest you look up flash tutorials and practice in the shooting range. So now we're going to be moving on to Killjoy. Now Killjoy is one of the most annoying agents in the game, but if you do want to get better at playing her, you want to make sure that you learn setups for her util. There are certain setups on certain maps that make it impossible for attackers to enter sight without one of them dying. These setups can guarantee that attackers do not get into your sight unless they either get rid of them or your util runs out. Now you can learn these things through experience, but if you do want to get really good at Killjoy really fast, I suggest you just look up YouTube strats. There are a lot of setups you can learn, and the cool thing about Killjoy is that you can be pretty creative with her. Like you don't have to play the same setup every time. If you kind of learn how attackers come into sight, or maybe how defenders hold, for example, you can even use it as an offensive option, like with her mollies and stuff. Like she's really a creative character, and as much as I hate her, I have to give respect that you have to be really good to be a really good Killjoy, and if you put in the time, you can get there. But in conclusion, the difference between a bad Killjoy and a good Killjoy are how good she uses her mollies. So now we're moving on to Omen, which is probably one of the highest skill ceiling characters in the game. And the main mechanic when it comes to Omen is learning how to use his teleport effectively. Now he is a smoke character, so he is pretty complex to play compared to some of the other characters, but I'm not going to be going into smokes or anything like that because that's kind of basic and that's kind of streamlined for every other smoke as well. So I'm going to be going into things that are mainly Omen based. Now the cool thing about Omen's teleport is that he is one of the only characters in the game that get from one place to another without following the rules of the game, which is walking there. Learning the range of the sound cue of your teleport and trying to get it to spots that people don't expect you without them hearing you is huge. And what a lot of good Omen players do is that they use their blind in order to mask that sound cue. Whenever you blind anybody as Omen, they have to immediately think of the fact that you might be somewhere around them or maybe even behind them if they're that close to you because of your teleport. So what makes a good Omen is that they're able to keep the enemy team guessing. So if you do want to get better at Omen, I suggest that you go into a private game and go around the random maps and try to find out what you can teleport to and what new angles you can find. So now we're going to be moving on to Phoenix, and I know this is going to sound a bit weird, but the best thing to learn with Phoenix is learning to be confident. Now it's crazy to me how Riot managed to put his confident look into his playstyle, because that's exactly how you have to play Phoenix if you want to be effective. He's one of those balls to the wall character, and you kind of have to follow up on a lot of your util in order to get any use out of him. You cannot hesitate whenever you flash something, because that util is really all you got to get into sight and get people out of angles. Now there is a reason that most of his util allows him to either heal or regain health, because he is a very aggressive character and you have to play him like that. If you feel like you're playing Phoenix and you're not doing very well, then maybe you have to practice on being more confident and trying to get into more gunfights. Maybe you're scared of taking gunfights, and that can actually hurt you in the long run if you play him. Other than that, Phoenix's flashes are pretty good, but there are small things that you can do to make them a bit more effective, like bouncing them off the ground and stuff like that. And I don't know too much about that, but they are very effective whenever they're used against me, so that is something you might want to get into. So now we're moving on to Raze. And the best thing to learn about Raze is of course her satchel charges. Learning that movement will make you a great Raze player compared to other Raze players that don't know how to use them correctly. Now there are of course other things to learn with Raze like nade placement, but she's the only character that can get to certain places at a certain speed. Like she can make it from A main to heaven in seconds on split, for example. Like it's crazy. She's probably the fastest character in the game when she has her satchels in her kit. And if you haven't seen this in action, which you probably have, but just in case you haven't, you can look up a Flight on YouTube. He is a Raze main that does absolutely nutty things with Raze. Like it's crazy that he can get to certain spots that fast. So if you want to get better at Raze, try going into a custom match and practice. Try getting into certain angles as fast as you can, and trust me, that will make you a better player. So now we're moving on to the second most popular duelist in the game, and that is Reyna. And the main thing you have to learn with Reyna is which ability to use whenever you kill somebody. I see a lot of low level Reynas that tend to heal every time they kill somebody because they get hurt and then they get traded out because they're stuck in the healing animation. If you go to any pro league game, for example, that has a Reyna in it, 9 times out of 10 that Reyna will dismiss after killing somebody and not heal even if they get really hurt. You see, whenever you heal as Reyna, you get stuck in an animation, and not only that, but they can see the line and trace exactly where you are using that line. The strongest thing you can do in Valorant is get a kill and not get immediately traded out. And you see, that's exactly what Reyna can do. Leaving a sticky situation with 10 health is 10 times better than dying trying to heal after getting a kill. Now, I'm not saying that healing is bad, but like I said before, this is the main thing you have to learn with Reyna, when to use which ability. So now we're moving on to Sage, and the main thing you want to learn with Sage is how to use her walls effectively. If you see any kind of Valorant on YouTube, you might have seen people that are making a name for themselves by playing Sage and using her walls in creative ways to create new angles. There is so much you can do with Sage walls, and not only that, you can also synergize with a lot of your teammates. Like for example, on Ascent, if you wall up Omen on B main, he can actually teleport into sight. But you can also create new angles and new ways of holding a bomb if you learn how to use her walls in creative ways, like I just said. Like it's actually insane how good her wall is, and I don't know if they'll ever nerf it because it's crazy what you can do with it, but it is something that you do want to learn. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can actually go to YouTube and just look up Grims, who is a great Sage player and who came up with a lot of these basic walls that can help him get new angles and stuff like that. It's very interesting to watch. So now moving on to Skye. Skye is what I consider the most annoying character in the game. And to be honest, I consider her the first support duelist hybrid. I honestly think she's one of the best characters in the game, and she has so much utility to help her frag out. It's insane. The main thing you want to learn with Skye is how to use her flashes, because her flashes, when used correctly, are impossible to fucking avoid, especially if she knows when to pop them. Now the most OP thing about Skye is that she has to confirm on her flashes, so if you do flash somebody, you'll be aware of it. Now with every other character, you don't know if you flash somebody or not, but not only that, you don't even have to peek if you do flash somebody. The intel is enough for you to make a move. Just knowing that somebody is in the area that you flash is a lot of information, and if you play a lot of Valorant, then you know information is key. Now another thing that makes Skye really good is that she is one of the only characters that can fake a flash. With every other character, you kind of just flash and just hope to get blind, but with Skye, you can throw out your flash and never pop it. Meaning you can walk into sight and have all the enemies with their back facing towards you because they're trying to 180 your flash. Now I don't play Skye too much, but whenever I have teammates that play Skye, sometimes they'll tell me, hey, go into sight and I'm gonna fake flash. So I follow his bird and I just kind of kill people for free because everyone's looking away from the bird trying to avoid getting flashed. And not only that, but you can flash for yourself. Like you can have your gun up by the time your bird flashes and you can get a free kill. Like it's insane how good she is, and I kind of expect a nerf at some point, but I don't know, I could be wrong. So next we're going to be moving on to Sova, and of course Sova is all about lineups and it's about learning to use his arrows. Now Sova probably has the highest skill ceiling in the game because there is so much you have to learn when using his utility, and not only that, the more maps are released, the more you're going to have to learn. Now for Sova, it's all about the lineups, and that's kind of what you want to learn. There are certain spots on certain sites where his recon arrow is god tier because it covers almost the entirety of the site, and if it doesn't cover all of it, it'll leave just a few angles that you can check manually. Not only that, but as the game gets older and older, I noticed that I died to a lot more shock arrows because people are learning how to use them correctly. There are certain nooks and crannies that you kind of want to avoid whenever there's a Sova in your game, because a lot of the times they have lineups for those angles and you're gonna get fucked without being able to trade them out pretty much. So in conclusion, if you want to get better at Sova, the best thing you can do is learn setups to either clear angles with shock darts or try to get as much information with your recon dart. So moving on to Viper, pretty much the best thing you want to learn with Viper are lineups for her acid. Now yeah, her wall does make a big difference when taking sight because she pretty much is another smoke, but the wall is not that hard to learn. You just kind of, throw it in a certain line. But when it comes to snake bites or her acid, lineups can actually make a huge difference because you do not have to play on site. There are some characters that can do this, like Sova for example, but her snake bites are pretty effective and they do a lot of damage. Being able to stay in the back after planting a bomb and playing lineups while the rest of your team try to, hold angles is pretty much one of the most annoying things to deal with whenever you're trying to defuse a bomb. And trust me, if you learn that, you're gonna be a great value to your team. Not only that, but whenever she's on defense, she actually has a lot of good one-ways she can do with her little orb. So if you do learn that, that is also super annoying, and it's not like Cypher or Omen where the smoke or the one-way will eventually run out. She can actually keep reusing it, which is insane. So now we're moving on to Yoru, and Yoru is going to be really hard to explain because he's probably one of the hardest characters in the game to be good at. Now, a lot of people think Yoru is trash, and I do not agree whatsoever. I think he's just too hard that people don't want to put in the time to learn them. If you look at people like Ethos, for example, you can see how effective Yoru can be even in the highest level of gameplay. I think the main thing you want to learn with Yoru is how to not be predictable, because his entire character is based off game sense. If you want to be a good Yoru, you have to have amazing game sense, and you have to have a mental image of where all the enemies could be on the map. Once you have that mental image, you have to learn how to use your utility effectively in order to try and confuse them. Now, this is exactly why his kit allows him to be one of the best lurkers in the game, because he can deny a lot of info, but he can also give a lot of bad info. For example, if your team is trying to take A and you send fake footsteps on B, that person on B, the defender, will have no choice but to stay because they feel like there might be someone lurking, and you can immediately go back to A side and help your team. Like, he brings this unpredictability to the game that is really hard to deal with if you're not aware of his tricks. And this isn't really for playing Yoru, but if you don't play Yoru at all, I suggest that you pick him up for a little bit just so you can learn how he plays, because he can be very effective and annoying if you don't know his strategies. So next we're going to be talking about Astro, and one of the main things you want to learn with Astro is of course how to use her stars. Now, you have so many abilities as Astro, it's kind of hard to get down, and it's a lot to take in at once. But what's cool about Astro is that her abilities are so good you can almost force the enemy team to play a retake and not really give you too much of a problem whenever you're walking into a bomb site. So you could YouTube stuff and learn things that way, but also one of the biggest things that I had to learn when playing Astro is how to not fumble your keys. So what I mean by this is that Astro can do a lot, but she has a lot of buttons she has to press. You have to go into star mode, and then you have to click where you want your stars, and then you have to press what button you want. So she is a lot more mechanically difficult to play if you're not really familiar with the way her whole interface works pretty much. So there were times when I was learning to play Astro that I would kind of have to put down an alt or an orb under pressure, and I kind of fumbled my keys, and I kind of never really did it, and I got stuck in my little putting down smokes animation, and it got really awkward. So what you could do with Astro if you want to get better at her is you can go into practice mode and practice putting down smokes, practice putting down smokes and then stunning, practice putting down smokes and then popping the smokes, and stuff like that, because you do not want to be fumbling your keys mid game when you're under pressure and you hear people running at you and you have to put a smoke as fast as possible. Like, trust me, I know it may seem like it's not that big of a deal, but it's gonna happen, especially if you're not familiar with her. So just try to practice that. So now moving on to Breach, and the main thing you have to learn with Breach is actually not something mechanical, but something verbal. The cool thing about Breach is that he can take a bomb site almost for free if he plays with his team, but the main thing is he has to call out what he's using. If you play Breach, okay, and listen to me. If you play Breach, you have to call out every single thing you're gonna do, because Breach is literally made to help take a bomb site. If you want to take a bomb site, for example, you're gonna tell your team, you're gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna flash in, I'm gonna flash this right corner, I'm gonna try to stun this left corner, or I'm gonna use my E on this other corner. Like, you have to tell your team what they're gonna do, okay? Because you can fuck up your team with your flashes, you can fuck up your team with stuns. But not only that, if you stun an angle, for example, then one of your teammates can swing that and get a free kill, and there's not much the defender can do about it. So you want to make sure that you tell your team exactly what you're going to do. If you use your little bomb blast on a corner, for example, and you don't tell your team, a defender who can be holding that corner will see that you're about to shit on them with that bomb blast, and he'll immediately peek. And if you tell your team that you're going to do it, they might expect that person to peek and be ready for it. But if you don't, your team might be caught off guard because they don't expect somebody to peek like that. So the biggest thing with Breach is you have to learn to communicate. Even if you're playing with randoms, you have to learn to call out what you're using, because it can make the game so much easier if you do. So moving on to Brim, of course the most important thing you want to learn with Brimstone is using his mollies. Now, his mollies do a lot of damage. I think it's probably the most effective molly in the game, and they can deny a lot of stuff. They can deny people from defusing, they can also deny people from walking in through a certain angle, and you can actually have a lot of lineups for it. I know it's pretty simple, but that's about it for Brimstone. So moving on to our final character, it is Cypher. Now I've noticed that the one difference between a good Cypher and a really good Cypher are the correct use of one-ways. Now one-ways are effective on almost every single map with every character that can do them, but the difference between Cypher is that he can have a one-way, but he can also have tripwires to help people from coming in completely. So if you're really ballsy, you can actually pop flash out of a one-way to get into sight, and sometimes the person holding the one-way might not expect it. But with Cypher, you do have to keep in mind that he has tripwires, so you cannot do that unless you get rid of all his utility. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, if I'm ever attacking a site and I see a Cypher one-way, I'm like, nah, this is Cypher knows what he's doing, and I'm gonna dip to the other bomb site. I'm not dealing with that. So if you want to get good with Cypher, trust me, that is one of the main things that you want to practice, because it is so hard to deal with if you're not used to it. I mean, fuck bro, even if you are used to it, man, it's really hard to deal with. So anyways guys, these have been my hardest things to learn for every character. Hope you all enjoyed. If y'all think I missed something, be sure to leave that in the comments below. Also my dudes, if you haven't checked out the Twitch, I would really appreciate if you do so. We are slowly growing and I've been having a lot of fun. All these clips that you see on YouTube are from my stream. I do stream almost every single night, so I would really love to see you all there. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.